Hello, everyone. My name is David Nethery. I'm president of Air for Arts, and I welcome you to this segment of AIRTime. Air for Arts inspires and nurtures the development of emerging artists and innovators through educational programs and mentoring resources. The organization also helps established creatives enhance their professional and entrepreneurial skills. And finally, Air for Arts offers a digital platform through which to share the fruits of creatives' efforts with the community. Think of Air for Arts as a greenhouse for creative endeavor. It takes a spark of imagination, nurtures it, encourages it, and helps it grow to the point that it blossoms. AIRTime is a program which features interviews with a diverse mix of creative thinkers. AIRTime began 11 years ago with Arts Incubator of Richardson, or AIR, which was the precursor to Air for Arts. For several years, our guests have been interviewed by David Fisher, the Assistant Director of Arts and Culture in the City of Dallas. David's interviews are always stimulating and very thought-provoking, and we try to bring him a diverse selection of creatives to be interviewed. Susan Morrow is the Executive Director of Air for Arts, and Susan, I'd like for you to introduce today's very special guest.
My pleasure. Thank you, David. We are excited to have with us Nancy Churnin, noted award-winning children's book author and journalist. In her children's book series, Nancy brings to life historical figures and presents them in a way that educates and delights children of all ages. For those of you in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you may remember Nancy as the theater critic for the Dallas Morning News. Without further ado, Nancy, we are happy to have you with us today. David?
Thank you, David and Susan. To everyone, welcome back to AIRTime. Whether you're watching us live or in the recorded version, we're glad you're here. Please help me welcome our guest for this evening, children's book author, Nancy Churnin. Now, this is our second AIRTime where we're broadcasting from the Walkabout office platform. And we'd like to thank the folks at Walkabout and especially CEO Tony Portman for their marvelous support. It's a great adventure to be working in this platform. So Nancy, you are a children's book author, but you haven't always been a children's book author. In fact, I think you said you published your book in your first book just in 2016.
That's correct.
So we'll get to the last 5 years in a bit, but how did you get here? What did you want to be when you were younger and when you were growing up? What other careers have you had?
Well, it's a great question. I think if you go back far enough, I actually always wanted to write books. And, when my mother was a teacher and I was always reading. There were always books in the house. And I actually used to write little books and carry a notebook around with me. Later, when I got older, I decided, I wanted to be paid for my writing. So I decided to become a journalist. And I also pursued another passion, which was to be a theater critic because I absolutely loved theater. And I was very fortunate to be able to be a theater critic for the Los Angeles Times in San Diego, and then later for the Dallas Morning News. And it was truly a joy and privilege to do that. And it was indirectly through being a journalist that I ended up writing my first children's book, which brought me full circle back to what I wanted to do when I was little.
It's fun. I too had books lying around my house when I was a child. Is there one you particularly remember, a favorite book from your youth?
Oh, that I enjoyed reading or that I enjoyed writing?
No, that you enjoyed reading.
The book I enjoyed reading was The Wizard of Oz, was my first favorite book. And my mother and I had a sort of a deal. She had to read to me every night. And she said, I need a day off. So I said, okay, if you want to take Sundays off, I need 2 chapters on Saturday. So that was like the first deal. And she did it. She was good to her word. And oh my goodness. And then, when I got to see the movie version, I remember seeing the movie version. You know how everyone was so delighted with the movie version, and yes, it was very delightful and of course scary when you're little about the witch. But I was the one who was disappointed they left out so many of the details from the book. You know, they're all.
And there are so many other books. I mean, the story goes on and on and on.
Oh, I know, but even the original, the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, there are 4 witches. There's a witch of the north, the south, the east, the west. There are all these other countries Dorothy goes to. I mean, it was really very detailed. And even then I'm thinking, they weren't exactly true to it. And actually what they did, though, was they created something marvelous that is parallel to it as opposed to being replicating it, which was actually good preparation for me working with illustrators later as a children's book author, because I learned, you know what, illustrators can't be literal about the text. They need to create. So again, that's true with film adaptations, stage adaptations. You have to have room to imagine and create your own reality.
Now, are there any extant early Nancy Churnin works from these youth years?
Oh, that's a funny one, because sometimes I share with them my book, D is for Doodlebug. It's really very encouraging to kids because, when they see finished books that you've worked on with professional illustrators and editors and proof, readers and all this, and they're all so polished, they think it's overwhelming. I said, that's not how the book started. And D is for Doodlebug. Is about a boy who's being called all sorts of different names, like, Doodlebug and Dandy Dan the Candy Man. And no one calls him by his right name, which is Daniel. And I illustrated every page. I am really proud of the goats that I made. Don't ask me why there are goats in a book called D is for Doodlebug, but I managed to work goats in because I'm a real goat fan. So anyway, I showed that to them. And the other thing that's funny about that book is that on every page of it, it says, from the desk of Douglas Churnin, because I swiped the paper from my father's desk. And it didn't occur to me that would be a problem, that every page would say, from the desk of Douglas Churnin, and then have the, the meticulous illustration and the words beneath it.
That's marvelous. That's marvelous. So after being a writer and a critic and a theater critic and all of that, what motivated you? What shifted in your life to suddenly give this focus to children's books?
Well, I was, at the time, my focus at the Dallas Morning News was I was covering kids' entertainment. And when I was covering kids' entertainment, I was very alert to any productions by young people. Garland High School in 2003 was putting on a play called The Signal Season of Dummy Hoy. And I went, what? Because most high schools, they put on the musicals that we're familiar with. Hello, Dolly, Maine, whatever it is. The Signal Season of Dummy Hoy. And it turned out it was a true story. And I went, this is really interesting. It was a true story about the deaf man in the 1800s who introduced signals to baseball so he could play the game he loved. Say and out is American Sign Language. I went, this is fascinating. And I asked them to set up an interview for me with the playwright. And Alan Meyer was a co-playwright. And I did an interview. It was fascinating. Alan's daughter is deaf. This was really a work of passion for him. It actually was off Broadway. And, I applaud Garland High School for doing it. The kids had to learn sign language to put it on. It was marvelous. Someone should do it, really, again. But anyway, so the story came out. And then a couple of weeks later, I get an email from a man in Ohio thanking me for the article. And I write back, oh, you're welcome. But why is someone in Ohio interested in a play in a high school in Garland, Texas?
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out Steve Sandy is deaf, a friend of the Hoy family. It was his passion and dream for decades to get William Hoy in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, where there are no deaf players honored. And he had Hoy on Google Alerts, and that's how he caught my article. We start emailing back and forth. We become friends. And he tells me about his dream to get Hoy in the Hall of Fame. And I said, and I come up with this brilliant idea. I say, how about I write a children's book and the kids will all read it, and then we'll start a letter writing campaign. It'll melt all their hearts. They'll put them in the hall. It was like it was like Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney. Let's put on a show. Let's do a book. And he says, sure, great. I said, but only if you can help me with it, because you know everything about this and I don't. So he said, sure. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be fun. It's going to be easy. It's like 800 words. It's a children's book. I'll polish it off on Sunday afternoon, no problem. So I polished it off on a Sunday afternoon. I sent it out, and I get a form rejection. What? So, all right, 2 afternoons. So I'll write it up again, and I send it out, and I get a form rejection. And this is really startling to me because I've been a professional writer for a long time. So I keep writing and rewriting and rejections and rejections. And like, I lost count of how many I got. Finally, someone was nice enough to say, very interesting story, but it reads like a newspaper article. Well, thank you. That's when I realized, okay, this is a different offer. It took so long for that light bulb to go on. And I started on my own time taking online courses and writing children's books, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I'm a very stubborn person, and when I make a promise, I keep it. And Steve Sandy just never lost faith in me. I promised him in 2003. 2016, my first book comes out, The William Hoy Story. And it went on several state reading lists, including the Texas 2x2 list. I got to present it at the National Baseball Hall of Fame, the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame. It sold out its first printing in a month and a half. It's been reprinted so many times. It's a favorite Deaf History Month. And that brought me back to my past when I always wanted to write books. And from that time on, I've had a book out every year. I now have 10 books this was in 2016. And I've had 10 books out now. I'll have my 9th and 10th this year.
That's amazing. So what is it that you enjoy about children's books? Why not spy novels or romance or nonfiction or?
Well, it is nonfiction pretty much, because they're true stories. What I love is what appealed to me about the story of William Hoy is what appeals to me, that what I look for in all the people that I pick. I look for someone the kids might not know otherwise. I mean, I said William Hoy, and most people go, who? And can you spell that for me, please? Someone you might not know otherwise, but someone who had a challenge, was told that their dream was unreasonable, it's never going to happen, the person was laughed at, discouraged, would not give up, a person who teaches perseverance, but not only made his or her own dream come true, made the world a better place for others. That is very important to me in each and every one of the books that I've done. The person has made the world a better place for others. I mean, William Hoy, he introduced science to baseball, made the game better for everybody, made it more inclusive, and broke down walls between the deaf and the hearing. And his story still breaks down walls between the deaf and the hearing.
Well, and I think he was a little earlier than Jackie Robinson, 30 years earlier, but you're breaking down barriers, and I mean, it's just about breaking down barriers like Jackie Robinson did, and so many other people did too.
Absolutely, and there's some wonderful stories about what Jackie Robinson also meant to the deaf community. There's a wonderful children's book. I'm going to have to look that up, but it's about a young boy and his deaf father who would go to the games to watch Jackie Robinson, because it was so clear to them that the way Jackie was breaking barriers was similar to how deaf people were trying to break down barriers. These stories are similar, and they give people courage and hope. They're about perseverance and courage. And again, Jackie Robinson too, he made the game better for everyone. And I also have in one of my books, he plays a part. I mean, I don't like to write about people that everyone knows, right? Because I feel there are enough books about them. But in Charlie Takes His Shot, which is a story of the first Black player on the PGA Tour, Jackie Robinson plays a role, because after Jackie's career was over, he dedicated himself to lifting others up, and he helped fight for Charlie's right to play.
That's great.
he not only inspired Charlie to follow his dream to become a professional golfer at a time when there were no Black professional golfers, but then he continued to help writing essays in the New York Post about let Charlie play.
So telling the stories of these people certainly seems to inspire you, and I think be a great segment in the children's books. Are there any dragons or wizards or talking caterpillars or anything in your idea file?
Well, not yet. I have to tell you, I love all type of writing, and I'm a big Harry Potter fan, since you mentioned that, and I love reading everything, and who knows what's on the horizon. I mean, right now there just seemed to be so many stories that weren't being told. A lot of my books about people who had never had, people like Charlie never had a book about him before, and so I've been very dedicated to that. But I think about those things, and what I also like to tell kids is, do you like Harry Potter? I'll ask them, and of course the hands all go up. And I said, well, think about it. Any book, any of these books, and these may be true stories, but think about the magical things they do, like the Time Turner, they take you back in time, like Flu Powder, they take you to different places, and like that special potion that changes how you look, they put you in another person's body, heart, have you walk, in their shoes. So really, books are the greatest magic there is. The only I would compare them to is theater. Theater does that as well.
Mm-hmm. So what's your process? You find one of these, you find an article or hear about or a story or something. How do you go from that idea, boy, this would be a really cool story to tell, to the final product? How does it get made?
Well, that's a great question. It sort of varies, and I have a little bit of a kind of trust my heart with it, because there are a lot of worthy stories out there, and I have to go with the ones that I can't let go of. With William Hoy, as I said, that was a promise I made, but also I was just fascinated with this guy whose story wasn't told. And this one, my second book, this was a crazy idea, really a crazy idea for a children's book. I read an article about this man in India who, poor village, they didn't have a school for the kids. He spends 22 years chiseling a path through a 300-foot mountain. I know. So the kids in this poor village can get to school on the other side. I know how you even turn that into a book, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. Now, with William Hoy, my friend Steve Sandy, and later my friend Eric Nadell provided me with a lot of research, tons of research, even though not much was written in terms of freestanding books about William Hoy. There was a lot of research out there. This was hardly anything. Dashrath Manjhi, this was mostly, I looked up videos and just studied them and watched him. He was interviewed numerous times. And I just absorbed it. With Charlie Takes a Shot, there was actually an autobiography. It's out of print, called Just Let Me Play. And then also articles. And then the late Dan Jenkins was also a fact checker for me on this one. Plus, I consulted golf experts. So each process is different. I have to go like Irving Berlin. I got wonderful help from Ted Chapin at the Rodgers and Hammerstein Foundation, who put me in touch with Irving Berlin's daughters to do a final fact check on this. Plus, I consulted Philip Furia, who wrote an adult biography about Irving Berlin, just to make sure all my facts were correct. So some of them will have a lot of information. Some of them will have hardly any. And I work with what I have. This one that came out this last year, this is the first book about Laura Wheeler Waring, whose dream was to see faces like hers on museum walls at a time when the museums were segregated too, right? Now, there were no books about her. All I had to go on was a painting that I fell in love with. The painting was in the Smithsonian, the National Portrait Gallery. So I chased my looking for information. I went to the National Portrait Gallery, and they helped me, and they put me in touch with her heir, Madeline Murphy Rabb. So that was like really a long roundabout way to get whatever I could into family interviews. So, you know what, I use my journalism background there. I get the information where I can get it, I absorb it, and then the key is to try and find the through line. What was the dream? What was this person trying to achieve? What were the obstacles? How did that person not only overcome but rise above? And in what way did they change the world for the better? So I'm always looking for those elements to the story as I'm doing my research.
Now, do you have to get permission from these people to write their stories? Or I guess because they're public figures, you can just tell a story?
Well, it depends if they are public figures. So for instance, you don't need permission to tell Irving Berlin's story. He's a public figure. At the same time, I wouldn't have felt comfortable if I hadn't connected with the family. Because, you know, there's so much out there. I wanted to make sure that what I had was correct. And also, I like to have support of the family because, again, I'm trying to do honor to these people. And they tell you things that I wouldn't know otherwise. So for instance, this is about to be reprinted in paperback in September, and Charlie Sifford is gone, but his son, Charles Sifford Jr., has written the blurb for the back.
Perfect.
And because he loved it so much, and he says his grandson loves it, and it's, you know, and it's brought so much pride. And, you know, I've had some of the descendant of Laura Wheeler Waring reading this book on Facebook, and that makes me feel so proud that they feel I got the story right. So it's not necessary they're famous, but some of them are not so famous. But in general, I do like to, I love getting to know the families and working with them. I enjoy that part of it.
Well, I'm sure it makes your writing, you know, even in 800 words, I'm sure it makes your writing all the richer. So we have a special treat for people who are watching. Nancy has actually put together a presentation of her books, and I'm going to screen share Nancy's books. And Nancy, I'll just keep up with you. We're on the title page, and we'll go from there. I'll be your slide turner.
All right, just go for it. So the fun thing, I think, for the kids is to see the real people behind the book. So there's the William Hoy story, and he looks like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But if you go to the next page, there is his baseball card. Oh my goodness, I have his baseball card.
Wow.
And those are his statistics. You know, there was a game, you know, you could see one of the games he was in, and that is his plaque at the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame. Now, what we're still trying to do is get him in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. So if anybody wants to join our letter writing campaign, we're trying to get all those letters in by June to get him on the December ballot. But he's already in the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame. That's his plaque. And they're actually in the process of making a bobblehead for him in Cincinnati. I know, he was big in the Reds. He played 14 years in the major leagues, but the Reds were really his team because he was from Ohio. Wow. And he played there the most. And there's Manjhi. I was telling you about Manjhi, the man who moved a mountain. So this book, which will seem like a crazy idea, my books have been all on state reading lists, won all kinds of awards. It's probably won the most. I mean, it's up for a Sakura Medal, South Asia Book Award. It's been translated into many languages, including Braille. And that is the real mountain. Right there, the kids like to see. That's what he chiseled for 22 years.
Wow.
And it shows we can all move mountains because, as I like to point out to the kids, he was not the biggest, he was not the strongest, he was not rich, he was not famous. He had a dream and he had perseverance, and he couldn't be laughed out of it, mocked out of it. And he just went there every day, got the job done, and that's what he did. And there's the real Manjhi again. There's a statue they made for him in his village. And that last is a stamp because the Indian government recognized the greatness of what he did. I have the actual stamp here as well, and there it is. So here he is, a simple laborer. And just because he had a dream and wouldn't give up, made things better for everyone, he is honored as a great man. He is a great man.
That's
We can
marvelous.
all move mountains. I created a project for this one called Move Your Own Mountain. And what I like to point out is Manjhi moved an actual mountain to help others, but every time we do kind things, we are helping others. Kids are sending in pictures of things that they do, collecting food for the hungry, clothes for people who are cold, going to shelters to help others, and they're sending these pictures, and we're putting them up on the Move Your Own Mountain page.
That's marvelous.
Here's my Charlie. Remember, we talked about Charlie Takes His Shot, now in hardback, but this is going to be my first one in paperback coming out in September. And we can turn the page and you can see the real Charlie. And and there is Charlie. And a lot of kids think Tiger Woods was the first Black golfer on the PGA Tour, but Charlie was one who opened the door Tiger Woods walked through, and Tiger Woods acknowledged that. As a matter of fact, if you go to the Smithsonian Museum of African American History, in the Tiger Woods exhibit, you will see a picture of Charlie Sifford. And Tiger Woods named his son Charlie after Charlie Sifford. Yes, and he said of Charlie was his unofficial grandfather. I mean, there was no blood relation, but his unofficial grandfather, because he says if Charlie hadn't broken through that barrier, then Tiger's father wouldn't have picked up a golf club, and then Tiger wouldn't have learned. And that picture over there is President Barack Obama giving Charlie Sifford the Presidential Medal of Freedom in the White House. So for all he suffered, because it took him so long to break through. He didn't break through till his career was almost over, but he never gave up, and he had a wonderful wife by his side who supported him every step of the way. And that's his great-grandson, who's going to be mentioned in Charles Sifford Jr.'s blurb at the back of my book, Gregory Poindexter, and he plays golf just like his great-grandfather, Charlie.
Well, and what a great example of how important one story, one person hearing a story about someone, that they never would have heard of can change their life and change the world.
Exactly. I think that's so true. I mean, what Charlie did made Tiger's dream seem possible and attainable. And he was also able to do what he did as a young man. Charlie had to spend most of his great playing career just fighting for his right to play. Mm-hmm. And you know what? You mentioned Jackie Robinson earlier, and one of the, a very important person who advocated for Charlie to get this honor at the White House was Rachel Robinson, Jackie Robinson's widow. The Robinsons were always great supporters of Charlie Sifford and his dreams. And Irving Berlin, we mentioned Irving Berlin, and this was like bringing, again, like full circle with all my theater roots, love all those theater songs. And there I am with the illustrator, James Ray Sanchez. We had just received the Sidney Taylor Notable from the Association for Jewish Libraries. It also won the National Council for Social Studies Notable. And there's the real Irving Berlin. He was a veteran. And he served his country as a veteran by writing songs and having the first integrated shows in the Army. Back when the Army was still segregated, but he insisted on his shows being integrated. The other thing few people know about Irving Berlin is that all the songs that he wrote for the Army, he didn't keep a penny of them. He gave them all back to the Army and to veterans. Oh, and one more funny thing about that. So when Irving Berlin went into the Army, and of course, one of the, people, the U.S. was fighting against Germany, right? So the New York Times headline said, U.S. Army takes Berlin. That's true. Headline writers, they're the best. Oh, and the Queen in the First Christmas Tree. Now, this came about because I always wondered how the tradition of the Christmas tree came about. I was just curious. And I looked it up, and it came from a kind queen named Queen Charlotte. And here's the funny thing about it. So I write this book, and she was actually kind of pretty amazing. There's never been a book about her. So you know who her husband was? King George III, the king of the American Revolution. I know. I love to say this to kids because they all know King George III from Hamilton and the Revolution. I said, do you think he was married? And they're like, what? Yes, he was married to Queen Charlotte, and they only had 15 children. And of course, the other reason Queen Charlotte is famous right now is because of the series Bridgerton. That's Queen Charlotte, and you know, and her ancestry, you know. So it was just there's a portrait of the actual queen. But you know, I wrote about her. I thought it was I was interested first because of the Christmas tree, but what really made it a book for me was that she was a kind person. She was actually the first royal to make charitable giving part of royal duties, and her name is on the you know, the Queen Charlotte and Chelsea Hospital in London to this day. And Martin and Anne, oh, I've been doing so, and we have a wonderful presentation I did here with all of you here, Air for Arts, on Martin and Anne. This was a very personal book to me about the parallel lives of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Anne Frank, both born in 1929. And they faced a lot of the same challenges. And when you think about the book, for instance, Isabel Wilkerson's Caste, that deals with how there's a caste system in different countries through different times, you look at how their childhoods and you see how they had to endure so many of the same things, segregation, discrimination, and how they both use their words to articulate their vision of a better world. And if we turn the slide, you'll see the real people. And there's the real Dr. King and Anne Frank. They never met each other. You know, it's interesting. We always think of Dr. King as older, right, than Anne Frank, but that's only because he achieved fame as when he was older. And we always associate her as the teen from the diary. But they were born in the same year. And this is fascinating, the middle picture, because that is from the play, Letters from Anne and Martin. And after I had written this, I found that the Anne Frank Center for Mutual Respect in New York had seen the same parallels and independently had created a play completely drawn from their writings. So all of Anne's words are from the diary, and all of Martin's words are from the letter from the Birmingham jail. And it's parallel, but it's almost eerie how similar their hearts and their visions for a better, kinder, more inclusive world are. And the thing that really gives you the chills, in Letter from Birmingham jail, Martin says, if I had been living in Hitler's Germany, I would have protected my Jewish brothers. In this play, usually they do the play parallel, but at that point they have the actor playing Martin look at the actress playing Anne. So you could see that connect. Very powerful. I recommend that highly, highly. And I actually just presented this book at school in Malvern, New York, and they treated their students to that play before I presented the book. They work very well together. Oh, and this was, I showed you this earlier. Beautiful Shades of Brown, again, Laura Wheeler Waring. I had the pleasure of also presenting this at the Dallas, the Cultural Arts Center and the South Dallas Center. Yeah. And the Latino Cultural Center, I'm sorry, and the South Dallas Cultural Center. And again, true story, and she's never had her story written before. It bothered me. We see like the same three women artists all the time, and they're wonderful artists, but there were more women artists than Georgia O'Keeffe and Mary Cassatt and Frida Kahlo. They're all fabulous, but I didn't need to write another book about them. But no one was writing about Laura Wheeler Waring, and she's fabulous, and I wanted all the kids to know about her. And that's the real Laura Wheeler Waring. And that's the portrait she did, I fell in love with, of Marian Anderson. And there's the real Marian Anderson. There's a wonderful picture book called When Marian Sang that I really recommend reading along with my book. That's another cool thing. You meet other wonderful children's book authors, you see other books, and a lot of them pair really well together. For Spacious Skies, yay! And we're going to be presenting that next month. And that is the true story of Catherine Lee Bates. A lot of kids know the song, "Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain." But when I asked the kids, do you know who wrote it? No clue. And they certainly don't know it was a woman who was a suffragette, who fought for social justice, and who also gave the song as a gift to America, never even took a penny for it. She was a Wellesley professor, and she was amazing. And I tell her story in For Spacious Skies, Inspiration for America the Beautiful. You know, what the last thing I want to say about that too is that she wrote it. She was a child of the Civil War. The country was very divided. Does that sound familiar? And she was hoping America the Beautiful would help Americans see themselves as one family from sea to shining sea. It would bring people together. That's the real Catherine Bates at her office at Wellesley. That's her as a baby. Cute baby. And there is Samuel Ward, who wrote the music. And what was interesting is he wrote the music and he passed away before this poem was even published. They just found that his music, which had actually been composed for a psalm, a church psalm called Materna, was the perfect match for her poem. They put it together at first, and then they said, "Are you sure we can't do better than this?" And they had a national contest, and everybody sent in tunes for this, and they listened to all these wonderful, wonderful compositions, and then they said, "Nah, Samuel Ward's music is the best fit for this." And we went back to that. That's true.
That's great.
Oh, and this is coming out this year. I'm so excited about this. A Queen for the Rescue, the story of Henrietta Zolt, founder of Hadassah. Again, she's never had a picture book about her. This is another woman who, like Catherine Lee Bates, who, again, you know, never had children of her own, but went on to save 11,000 children from the Holocaust, and in her 70s. And she also founded Hadassah, which was the first charity founded by women. Again, she was raised during the 1800s. Again, a child of the Civil War, 1800s, early 1900s, when women were told about all the things they couldn't do, and she just went ahead and took it on herself to try and make the world a better place. And this is her story. And this is also coming out in October. Dear Mr. Dickens, not a well-known story, but I'm so excited to share this with everyone. For all those Dickens fans out there, all you Christmas Carol fans, Dear Mr. Dickens is the true story of Eliza Davis, a Jewish woman who lived at the time of Charles Dickens. She was so hurt by his portrayal of Fagin as this horrible Jewish stereotype caricature. She wrote him a letter telling him how hurtful it was to her and the Jewish community, which was actually experiencing a lot of anti-Semitism in the 1800s in England. And at first he reads the letter and goes like, what? Who are you, to tell me this? But then he reads and he thinks and letters go back and forth. She changes his heart. He ends up becoming an advocate for the Jewish community, writes essays supporting the Jewish community in his magazine. And in his final book, Our Mutual Friend, writes a kind Jewish character, Mr. Rhea. And she was so moved by this. And I have to tell you, I've shared this book with the Dickens Museum. Oh, this is the real Charles Dickens. That's Fagin. Ooh, Fagin. And I make these parallels to Ebenezer Scrooge because in a way, Dickens was like a little Scrooge-like to Eliza at first until she found a way to change his heart. And then he became, again, the reformed Scrooge. He does so much good and infinitely more for the community. And I'm working with the Dickens Museum in London, and they're going to incorporate the book in their new Oliver Twist exhibit. I'm so excited about it. And I'm also honored because the Jewish Chronicle in London, which would the paper that Eliza Davis herself would have read, they have asked me to write something about this book for them. So that would have been her hometown paper. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, what a treat to sort of see examples of all those books. I'm not even sure where to start. I noticed that it seems like you've worked with several different illustrators. So how does that relationship work? What is the give and take? What's the working relationship between the author and the illustrator?
I think the best comparison, especially coming out of the theater world, is when you think about the director. The editor is like a director. So my manuscript is acquired by an editor. The editor is like a director or a matchmaker, which as you were, and the editor will pick the illustrator. The editor will look at the text and say, this is the kind of look I envision for it. So for instance, in Beautiful Shades of Brown, the editor is looking for somebody who could really capture Laura Wheeler Waring's style. And she found it in Felicia Marshall of Houston, who's like this is Felicia Marshall. She did the illustrations. When she was looking, the editor who picked William Hoy, even though it was kind of an 19th century story, she wanted something bright and cheery. Picked Jez Tuya, who does these computer graphics. So thought that would really connect with the kids and make it seem more accessible and less, out of reach for them. With Manjhi Moves a Mountain, the editor said to herself, this, even though it's a true story, it reads like a fairy tale or a folk tale. I want someone who's a master of watercolors. Each one of these is a watercolor painting. Mm-hmm. And it's just extraordinary. I've been so lucky with the editors. They've had such wonderful visions. When you think about it, again, to make that comparison with the director of the play, they'll read a script, right, and come up with who they want to work with for the stage design. So, in many ways, the illustrator is like a stage designer, and they get the freedom, which is wonderful, to really create their own vision and do things that weren't in the words. And I love that part of it. And I'm always surprised by some of the things they come up with. Did I say anything about constellations in Manjhi? No. But Danny Popovich decided there should be constellations about what Manjhi Manjhi's dreams of himself, a constellation of a man with a hammer in the sky. And the kids love that.
Have you ever had a book evolve or change in a surprising or unexpected way?
You mean because of the illustrations?
Or just the process of editing, or from beginning to end?
Yes, some editors are truly, truly gifted, and I have been so lucky to work with them, and you'll go back and forth a lot. And even with Dear Mr. Dickens, which was a very special project for me, I actually started in 2013 and did research in the Dickens Museum in 2014, and it's coming out this year. When I worked with my editor, Wendy McClure, on it, when she read it and she looked at my back matter, she said, the back matter is what you have as like a little statement about the book, putting it in context at the back of the book after the book is over. She says, I really like your back matter. Do you think you could bring that into the main text? I went, And so I kind of reworked the whole ending to work in the back matter that I had, and then created fresh back matter. And I'm so much happier with how it turned out. I mean, I think she was brilliant. She knew exactly what it needed. And I feel myself really lucky to work with gifted editors. Because, when you're deep into something, you know what you meant to say, you know what you're trying to bring across. And it really helps to have a gifted editor who is looking at it with fresh eyes and anticipating how it's going to read to the children.
And then, but not to reveal any of your upcoming secrets, but what is currently swirling around in your idea file? What's coming? What are those ideas or stories that you want to work on that you can talk about?
Well, I have nothing I can talk about yet with any specifics, because things are just sort of in the air. But I know I have a book that I'm just, that I love, that I was working with. I'm not going to give the name, but it was somebody else in the theater world that I admire so much, and really has been glowing about the manuscript I created about him. and an editor is looking at that right now. And then there's another one I have to get back. My agent was telling me that it was something that I sent in that some editor is very intrigued by, and it's just a real variety of things. And one thing that's also happening, it's interesting you asked about the magic and all that. So one of these things that's being considered is another biography, and then some other things are more fanciful. And there's another thing I know you're aware of. The one thing I can talk about, because I know you're aware of it, is, Cheryl Allison has this wonderful story about her friendship with Honk the Duck, and she has entrusted me with working on that. So I have been working on that book and trying to find that a good home. It's just such an inspirational story, and I admire Cheryl so much.
So, looking back, other than having a decades-long career as a writer, and parents who fostered that as a youth, what bit of advice would you give someone who says, "Wow, I'm inspired by this. I want to do this"?
Well, the first thing is, I think, always to do what's in your heart to do. And I think with each and every book I have done, it has been from my heart. And I don't go around looking at what someone else has written, whether it's got this award or this level of success or whatever it is. I do the books that are in my heart. I support the other, be part of a community. Learn what you can. There's a lot to learn. But once you learn it, you also have to find your own voice. You have to find, there are different ways of telling the story. For instance, the year I wrote Irving Berlin, it turns out after no one writing about Irving Berlin, 3 books came out that year. Better 3 picture books. I mean, what were the odds? But here's the thing. I wrote the Irving Berlin book that was in my heart to write. I wrote what was important to me to share to the kids about Irving Berlin. And the other 2 books were wonderful. No criticism of the other books. We all work from the same facts, but those writers picked what was important to them about the story. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, you're going to have to learn how to write a picture book. Again, it's different from an article, which I learned. It took me a while to learn. Have your group of fellow writers, have your community that you can bounce ideas off of and share, and support each other. Support each other. Remember, it's actually not a competition. It is, we're all in this together. And I think that's something, again, I learned from the theater world. Great art is created in collaboration. Mm-hmm. Not only the collaboration of your team that creates the specific play or the specific book, but the larger community, right? For theater to thrive in a community, the theaters have to support each other. Theater artists have to support each other. And that's what I do in the book world. I support other book authors, and they've been wonderfully supportive of me. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes the journey sweet, because you're going to spend a lot of time on your own and find your own unique voice, and a lot of times alone in front of the computer or your drawing board or your notebook. But it's so important to be on this path with others. Remember why you're doing it. I always hope that my books are going to help a child's heart grow, make a child feel braver, to recognize his or her own unique voice, dream, to pursue that, to feel empowered, to feel seen, and then to turn around and help others. That's always my goal. And if other authors are doing that, I am just applauding them, because no one person can do this alone. We're all in this together. I love finding kindred spirits wherever I go.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I can sense the heart and spirit that you bring to your books. So we'll finish up with our top 10 lightning round questions, which I have chosen specifically for you. They're either or answers, or just the first thing that comes to mind. So are you ready?
Yes, David. This is all a surprise. So,
number 1, Julia Child or Martha Stewart?
Julia Child.
Number 2, the first Broadway musical that comes to your mind?
Man of La Mancha.
Number 3, what is the one period in history you wish you could go back to and revisit?
Ooh, 19th century. I just find that so many of my subjects live in the 1800s.
Number 4, George Clooney or Tom Hanks?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I'm going to go with Tom Hanks.
Number 5, what is currently on your nightstand?
Um, I think it's A Secret Life of Trees.
Number 6, San Francisco or New York City?
That's another tough one, but I have to say New York City. I'm a native Bronx girl.
Number 7, the last TV show that you binge watched?
Ooh, Mum. It's a British show. I love Mum. I totally recommend it. I'm a little hooked that I keep watching it. It's beautifully done, and I love each and every character in it. Mum.
Number 8, ocean waves on a sunny beach or babbling brook in the mountains?
Babbling Brook in the Mountains.
Number 9, the one book, children's or otherwise, that everyone should read?
Children or otherwise. Wow. There's just so many that I love. A Tale of Two Cities.
And number 10, your favorite comfort food?
Chocolate, dark chocolate, very, very dark chocolate.
All right.
That was
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please, everyone, send out your virtual vibes and thanks to our guest, Nancy Churnin. It's been a pleasure knowing you for as long as I have, and a real pleasure getting to know more about your books and your writing here. It's been a real great time. So I will now turn it back over to David and Susan, who will tell us about next month.
Thank you, Nancy and David, for a most interesting and fascinating conversation. I truly think and believe our viewers will have gleaned some various nuggets, Nancy, from your amazing personal insights and little known knowledge about individuals who have played such huge roles in history. Mm-hmm. And for many of us, a few that we never knew. So thank you so much for being here. On behalf of Air for Arts, we encourage all of you to visit our website, airforarts.org. That is AIR number 4 ARTS.org for information about preceding podcasts, as well as details about upcoming AIRTime interviews.
Yes, Susan, I agree with you completely. A wonderful interview, as always. And I was fascinated with the collaborative process that is required in creating a children's book. The author, the editor, the illustrators. Wonderful interview. I do hope all of you will join us for our April AIRTime interview, which features Nadia Fairlam, a successful wood sculpture artist who lives and works in Hawaii. Susan, I'm anxious to make that trip, aren't you?
You bet, David. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Nadia for a few years. She is a delight, and I know this is going to be a fantastic interview. Thank you all for being with us today.